It's 6 o'clock and welcome to the November 12th meeting of the governing body. I call this meeting to order. If you will give your attention to Councilman Dobler, who will provide the invocation, stand as you are able, and then remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have a formal invocation tonight. I would just like to take a moment to remember our first responders. Unfortunately, we have a number of them here tonight. Police, fire, AMR, or all the folks that go into places that we don't want to go into. I'd also like to add to that the public works crews. We're getting into winter. Doesn't feel like it now, but pretty soon it'll be winter, and in those days when nobody wants to get out on the streets, Public Works and Utilities are out there taking care of it. So I just like to remember all of those folks, keep them in your prayers. And with that, Mayor, I am done. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Madam Clerk, if you'll call the roll, please.
Mayor Padilla.
Here.
Councilmembers Hiller. Here. Valdivia Acala.
Here.
Ortiz. Banks.
Here.
Kell.
Here.
Miller.
Here.
Dobler.
Here.
Duncan.
Here.
And Hofer.
Here.
All right, we have 9 present.
Okay, Madam President, we'll move on to appointments. Madam Clerk.
A is a board appointment recommending the reappointment of Carol Jordan to the Topeka Board of Zoning Appeals to fill a term ending December 1, 2027. B is a board appointment recommending the reappointment of Doug Snook to the Board of Plumbing Examiners for a term ending December 31, 2026. And C is a board appointment recommending the appointment of Toby Taggart to the Board of Building and Fire Appeals for a term ending September 6, 2026.
Okay, you've heard the appointments as read. Is there a motion to approve? Motion approved by Councilman Dobler, second by Councilman Banks. All those, well, let's see, we'll have to use our rope.
Yeah. So, Councilmembers Hofer?
Yes.
Hiller?
Yes.
Valdivia Acala?
Yes.
Banks?
Yes.
Kell?
Yes.
Miller?
Yes.
Dobler?
Yes.
And Duncan?
Yes.
We have 8 yes, the motion carries.
Okay, typically if those appointed are present, we'll ask them to stand so we can recognize them for their service and give them a round of applause. But even in their absence, if we could get a round of applause for those volunteers, I appreciate it. Thank you. Agenda item number 3, presentations. Madam Clerk.
City of Topeka Fire Medical Transport Analysis Report.
City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the governing body, Chief Phillips, and members of the Wichita State University team will lead us through this discussion.
Good evening.
Good evening, Council. Thank you for having me here. I would just like to let you know that 2 of my colleagues are online. Are they in the room? Okay. Awesome.
Tom and Jeremy?
Yes, that's them. Well, thank you for having us. My name is Isabel Ebersol. I'm a research project manager with the Public Policy and Management Center at Wichita State University, and I'll let my colleagues online introduce themselves as well.
Hello, everybody. Nice to join you virtually. I'm Tom Jenkins. I'm a project associate and subject matter expert with the PPMC. Nice to be with you tonight.
Jeremy Wade, appreciate your time. Also a project associate with PPMC, and look forward to speaking to you guys. Thank you for having us.
Can you all hear them okay, or?
Barely.
I'm having it turn it up.
Okay. And will they be on screen, Taylor?
Not right this second.
Okay.
Can I just press this to go? Okay. Well, before we share what we've been working on for the last 6 months, I'd like to share about what we did in 2022. One second here. In 2022, we worked with just the Topeka Fire Department to identify potential service enhancements with a specific focus on EMS service delivery. In that process, we conducted data analysis and did some stakeholder engagement, mostly with internal folks in the department. And this resulted in a report that had information on the department structure, best practices, as well as some innovative community examples. And also in that time, we developed 12 recommendations. For your convenience, those are listed at the back of this year's current report, because we might be referring to those in this year's recommendations. The scope for this year's project, though, was related to two questions. First, what is an appropriate level of EMS service delivery from TFD to the community? And then second, what recommendations should be implemented to achieve that goal over a reasonable time frame? So just wanted to set the scope before we jump into recommendations and our process, that these were the two main questions we were out to answer. Just a little bit about our process. We started by assembling a leadership team, which had members from Topeka Fire, of course, the city, ambulance provider being AMR, rural fire departments, local hospitals, the medical director, and a community member. That team assembled together, and our first course of action was to make some data requests. In this process, we learned a few lessons. The first being that AMR reports based on county zones, so there's 4 county zones. The county zones don't overlap exactly with the city of Topeka, and so we weren't able to get just city of Topeka specific data. One thing we were able to do, though, was establish a new report. We worked with AMR GMR to establish this, and going forward, they will be able to pull just City of Topeka specific data. So I think that was one good outcome that came from our data requests. And they were able to provide some summary data. However, due to privacy concerns, they weren't able to get as detailed as requested. At the same time, as we were making those data requests and working through those challenges, we did some engagement with some of you all. Good to see you all here today, and then also with the County Chiefs Association. So got their input and you all's input as to the scope of this project, what you would like to see come out of it, and then also what, from the County Chief's perspective, we should be considering. Now, throughout this whole process, the biggest lesson learned was that there is no perfect solution, but the ultimate goal is that the closest and most appropriate emergency resources are meeting industry standards in their response time when a sensitive emergency occurs. So just want to plant that seed throughout the rest of this presentation that this is the ultimate goal that we're working towards. And then just for a little bit of context, some of the unique complications here in this system are that there is an intergovernment area that the ambulance provider is serving, both here in the county. There's dissimilar organizations providing the same service. And then the tiered response system, coupled with some 911 call management capabilities, also complicate things just a little bit. And then, of course, limited resources for expansion and innovation is a final but top complication. So just want to set the scene, ultimate goal, context in mind before handing it over to my colleague Jeremy, who's going to walk through our recommendations.
Good evening again, Council. I'm going to speak with you on the recommendations that we came up with. We kind of focused in on 3 focus areas. I call it 3 buckets, if you will, to address our recommendations. Isabel, if you can go to that one, thank you. As we go through these, they're in no means, they're not in any priority order. It was kind of a collaborative effort. They're not inclusive, but more of a roadmap to better serve the community. Last thing I want to point out is these are just our recommendations. You guys are, we encourage you to do even more with them. They're merely our recommendations. I'm going to go through about 6 slides with our actual recommendations, and then at the end, we can go back and we can answer any questions specifically you have about any of the recommendations. The first one we're going to talk about comes out of the leadership and accountability. And one of the things that we said needs to happen is we need to establish a collaborative contract that represents Shawnee County and the city of Topeka with AMR GMR. That would require a minimum of 5 advanced life support ambulances inside the city limits. That kind of came out of the last report, and then the data kind of confirmed some of that for this go-round. And then we wanted to embrace incremental implementation of systems and methods as recommended. The second thing also came out of the leadership and accountability part. And this one was to assemble what we're calling an EMS advisory board to serve as an intentional point of connection and provide collaborative framework. Before I kind of give you the makeup, that was one thing we heard repeatedly through this process was they wanted collaboration from everybody that kind of had a hand in the system, better communication and talking. So that's kind of where this board spun out of with the help of recommendation from AMR was a big part of this component as well. The duties would be to collect contract management, resolve emergency healthcare needs, analyze data from AMR, GMR, and TFD, research programs for implementation, and periodically evaluate the EMS delivery model. Kind of the stakeholder group that would represent this board, this is what we came up with. We kind of got it to 8 different people. This would include Shawnee County, the city of Topeka, Topeka Fire, an official from the county, a county fire official, a local healthcare representative, a citizen at large, and the contracted ambulance provider, and then lastly, a non-voting member, but would be the medical director over the system. On the next one, we start falling into the interagency coordination and cooperation. Resize the geospatial boundaries currently used to measure performance. As Isabel kind of mentioned, when we're collecting data right now, it's kind of the county and city kind of are in the zone, what we call Zone 1. And this would have the city require performance reporting using geospatial boundaries that match fire station first due areas, or we could do city council districts. This twofold analysis would allow for more precise problem-solving strategies for future issues. So this is just kind of how we would gather reports in the future and hopefully get some better data that would match the city interest a little better. The next one is still under interagency coordination and cooperation. We want to evaluate emergency communications at the Shawnee County 911 Center and identify opportunities for enhanced call surveillance and processing. And then we want to implement public engagement apps to provide an enhanced level of bystander intervention and help with interagency awareness and coordination. On the next component, we're into what we call the response and deployment bucket, if you will. We want to develop the TFD workforce by implementing a program of emergency medical technician advance and paramedic trainings for firefighters. Attempt to train between 12 and 18 was the number we came up with. Develop the workforce of county fire departments to include them and help them pursue EMTA and paramedic programs. And then incrementally move to advanced life support within the existing Topeka fire companies at the approximate rate of 1 per year until every TFD station has an EMT paramedic level capability. I want to specify that's not truck specific. We're just saying that each station, if it's a 2-company station, that at least one of those companies would fall under that advanced life support component. And then the last recommendation, and it falls under the response and deployment bucket. The staff and implement fire department ambulances, specifically 3 TFD ambulances available and in service by the second quarter of 2027. These ambulances would support the existing EMS system and only respond to high priority medical call types and specific incidents associated with the fire department. These should be initially staffed as EMT basic level resources with migration to paramedic level resources by the fourth quarter of 2028. And so that's the recommendations we came up with. Myself and my colleague Tom would be more than happy to go back and answer any specific question in relation to any of them or the actual report.
Thank you. Just ask the governing body. Councilman Dober.
Yeah, if you could go back to that last slide. I'd like to ask you to explain that a little bit more. 3 TFD ambulances supporting the existing EMS system and only respond to high priority medical call types. What does that mean to a layperson?
Certainly, I think that's a great question, and I'd emphasize that there's some interrelation between the recommendations that are contained here that I think it's natural to focus on this as a very operational recommendation, but it also comes on the heels of an EMS advisory board that can help guide implementation of an idea such as this. I think one of the ways in which it could be deployed is right now, you have ambulances that are requested to respond with the Topeka Fire Department to incidents that involve high-risk situations to their firefighters, structure fires, technical rescue incidents, hazardous materials responses. And so it would be the utilization of those TFD resources to take off some workload from the contractual ambulance provider. In addition, these are resources that I would almost view as intercity mutual aid, that as the EMS deployment system that is provided by the contractual ambulance provider is strained, these become resources that they're able to utilize during periods of high call volume, during situations in which there is a high priority medical incident in proximity to the unit. And I think that over time, you're able to gain some alignment. But said more plainly, one of the primary purposes of PPMC being involved over the last 2 years with the city of Topeka was to find creative ways in which both the fire department and the ambulance provider could ensure an adequate amount of resources to handle the call volume and spectrum of need of the community. And so that's kind of the background and what could be a vision for how it might be deployed, Councilor.
Thank you. I've got a couple other questions, but I'll yield to.
Okay. Councilman Kell?
So I believe this would be more geared towards the chief. Would this create a new classification of firefighter for the ones that would possibly go into training?
So just as most area departments that operate ambulances, that would be our intent that they would be firefighters that would be cross-trained as well, no different, no less. I mean, they would be able to, they'd be able to be staffed on both ambulances and also on fire apparatus. So all of our current personnel at least have to be trained to the EMTB level. We do have some EMTAs as well as paramedics. We continue to work to try and increase those numbers. That's what it's allowed us to have the 4 fire companies that currently provide ALS first responder service. We have a 5th one that'll come online at the first of the year. So this would just be, once again, adding to that level of resource that we can provide to the community. But they still would be firefighters that would have all of that training and be able to respond to all types of emergencies.
And then, I know you may not have gotten deep into research on this yet, but what would be the cost of an ambulance for TFD?
I can't sit here and give you an exact number. They're not cheap. You have the initial outlay cost, and in talking with command staff from both Lawrence and KCK, I know that recently the most recent ambulance units that they purchased and the configuration they purchased them in were both in the $400,000 to $450,000 range. So then you have, this would require additional FTEs for staffing of the ambulance units. So you would have the additional personnel costs on a yearly basis as well of that.
And then on the implementation, by the second quarter of 2027, do you think that this is realistic with our current staffing and also call rate?
Well, as far as with current staffing, like I said, this would require hiring additional FTEs. Do I think we could get the additional personnel hired and trained by that time frame in 2027 if we were given that edict by the city manager and by yourselves? Yes, I do. We have a large enough of an applicant pool now, and we're continuing to see those numbers rise and where our current staffing's at. I do believe that we could have those additional staff hired and trained in that time frame.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilman Dobler, and then Councilman Banks.
Thank you, Mayor. My next question, then I'll yield to Councilman Banks. So somewhere in the presentation, you alluded to 5 ALS units as kind of the baseline within the city of Topeka. I guess I'm looking at the guy on the screen here. Do we currently have that with AMR?
I think that's what the model that is provided with AMR is a county-wide model. And they have a blended approach in which they use both basic life support ambulances and advanced life support ambulances. I have no doubt that many days there are 5 or more ambulances of the advanced life support variety available to be consumed within the city and the county. The subtle change with this recommendation is to ensure some earmarking of ambulances for the city, is for the city to, because of the risk associated with the population and the population density, to have a certain quantity. And it's probably worthwhile to note that there is no magic number associated with ambulance quantity per population size. And so we arrived at this number utilizing some surveys of other similar cities within the central time zone. Of course, we'd love to see more, but it's probably the most appropriate question to let AMR, GMR answer what their normal assignment would be and how many of those would typically be allocated to posts within the city of Topeka. But because of the variable staffing model, I would be unable to answer accurately for a full year.
Okay, just a follow-up, Mayor, to that same question. So number one on your, at the beginning of your presentation was to answer the question, what is an appropriate level of EMS service delivery to the community? In this case, the community city of Topeka. And so we're basically saying at this point that an appropriate level is 5 ALS units available in the city of Topeka at any given time. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. I'll have another one, but I'll yield to Councilman Banks.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor. My question is for Jeremy. Having been an EMT myself on the fire department here in Topeka, I'm wondering if we made a lot of recommendations in the presentation. So I'm wondering if we're currently staffed efficiently to meet these recommendations, and if we are not, how far are we away from getting there?
Counselor, when you ask me if you're staffed, are you talking about running these advanced EMTs and paramedics on the fire trucks? Is that what you're asking me?
Yes.
I would like to tell you that you are. It's basically we're taking people from the EMT basic level and getting them training to at least the advanced or to the paramedic level. I hate to kick it to Chief Phillips, but from a staffing standpoint, he would be better to answer that question. But basically, you're taking employees that are there under that one slide, and you're saying, we're going to move you on to this advanced level, provide the training for you, and then you would also have members that maybe not want to go to the paramedic level, but you would have some that hopefully would, and then they would take the training to go to the paramedic level.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilwoman Hiller.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just puzzled. You started the presentation by talking about the fact that our goal was to deliver the needed services or something to that effect, and said that we are currently meeting all response times and all needs. If that's the case, why do we need more? I don't know who to, I'm looking at you because you're here live, but whoever to look at.
It's on.
Yeah, I'm happy to tackle it. Councilwoman, was there a slide you're referencing where we said we're meeting everything? I'm not familiar with where that was in the presentation.
I don't think that's what.
Yeah,
I thought that's what I heard.
I kind of heard that too, and I realized that's the goal.
sorry, I might have misphrased that a little bit, but I was just saying that that is the ultimate goal that we're working towards before providing the context as to what's complicating the current system, was just stating that the ultimate goal is that the nearest first responder is arriving on time.
Okay, but I read the report and it indicated that we were doing very well with that. like a less than 3% miss on AMR's side, maybe TFD as well. I mean, it was basically the detail in that report said, we're doing a great job. Did I misread that?
I'm happy to tackle that. No, also a gold star for reading the report. I love that.
You're welcome.
Not everybody does that, so that's good. Here's what I would tell you is that there is a recommendation within our slides that Jeremy went over, specifically related to, it would have been under interagency coordination and cooperation, where we say resize the geospatial boundaries. And if I was an elected official, I would find that woefully unimpressive that that's a recommendation. But let me tell you why that's so imperative, is the way in which the current contractual ambulance provider is assessed is in these various zones. There's various benchmarks based on the priority of the call. And what we believe is important to improve the quality of care within the city of Topeka is for you all as elected officials to be able to answer the question of where. And so by sizing the geospatial boundaries of your community and then obtaining information on response times at a much more granular level, I think that gives both the chief, the contractual ambulance provider, the city manager, elected officials, everybody in between, the ability to understand not just the holistic performance of the ambulance system, but allows us to really dive into it and in a pinpoint way understand that this particular area of the community, north, south, east, west, downtown, this ward, this fire station boundary, has difficulty meeting those performance objectives that you set forth. And so the hope with this project is that we'll be able to obtain better information about response times that are more specific than just the system as a whole.
Can I follow up?
Yes.
No matter how we slice and dice the picture, if the reports are that per call, the data comes out that we're getting there on time with the right people, I don't understand why the slicing and dicing, recreating the measuring divisions would matter.
Well, we would prefer to see the data sliced so that the big N is what it is, that there are a certain number of calls that occur within the geospatial boundaries of Shawnee County, some of those within the city of Topeka. We were unable to obtain until modifications were made by AMR and GMR, certainly to their credit, and they did it quick, just what the performance is for the city. But when you look at the city holistically, what is likely to occur is in the distribution of those emergency incidents, there are always going to be some that improvement is needed. There's also, within the way in which that is audited and taken into consideration in the county, there is a pretty fair amount of flexibility with how that response time is recorded. If there's inclement weather, that sort of thing. And so I think that what you'll want to see within the city as you continue to do this kind of work, taking care of your citizens that are having time-sensitive and life-threatening medical emergencies, that you'll just want a better understanding of the data set. Because right now, to understand at a granular level performance related to EMS care, it's at 30,000 feet would be my assessment of it. And so this is an attempt to better understand the system going forward, which I think is crucial to making decisions.
Still doesn't work for me. Thank you.
Okay. Councilman Dover? Oh, Councilman Duncan.
So, Councilwoman Hiller, I would just suggest that part of the contract with the county includes the ambulance service having to provide reports on a regular basis, which include things like response times. And while I will tell you that while generally they do a good job, there are some areas of improvement. Those are online. You can take a look at those, and I would encourage you to do that. You can kind of see where some of those areas may be. A couple questions. Was there any look at how we got to the point, the underlying cause? I mean, is the reason we don't have what we think we need because nobody's asked, because we don't have enough money, because the county won't enforce something, because there's not enough staff for the ambulance provider to provide it? I mean, were any of the underlying issues of how we are where we are looked at as you went through this?
I'm happy to take it, although my colleagues may want to jump in. I would say in general, what we chose to focus on is how we make it better, knowing that the assessment of the current standpoint is that there's opportunity to improve. What we found, and we do plenty of these, is that you do have a spirit and a desire within that community to figure out how we close the gap to improve not only response times, but clinical care to patients. And so we did not spend a significant amount of time looking at historically some of the ingredients that may have had led us to this particular conversation. But if Isabel wants to jump in on there, or Chief Wade, I'm more than happy to allow you all to do it.
I mean, I will say, and I know some of them are here, so hopefully they'll hear me this time. Months ago, I had a meeting with several representatives from the ambulance service, and I asked what it would cost the city for some kind of addendum to get some additional ambulances so we would have an idea of cost, and I'm still waiting on that. So I will still put that out it would be really nice to know what that would look like if the city wanted to add those. A couple very quick questions. One's a frustration. I'm disappointed there's no costs in here at all. I mean, it's very hard to talk about this all conceptually, but without any sort of baseline cost, because it's not just ambulances and it's not just personnel. We now have to process payments, right? If we only get paid if we transport someone, but if we transport someone, we have to have people who know how to process Medicare, Medicaid, health insurance, right? And that's fine, but there's a cost to that. This doesn't say whether these will fit within our current facilities. Do we need more bays? Do we need to add a new station somewhere just for EMS and medical? Those are all things we're going to have to know before I think we can just say, great plan, but let's go with it so that we're not get some sticker shock and figure out how to pay for that stuff later on. So I will put that out there. Did we look at all at just providing transport service as opposed to EMS service and the reason I ask that is there's very clearly, from my understanding, a shortage in this community of that. It is a fee for service that could bring revenue in before we had to make these grand expansions into the EMS. I mean, was that looked at, or was this strictly just the EMS piece of this, as opposed to the transport services that medical ambulances also offer?
So, Councilman Duncan, a couple of things. First, as far as on costs, my staff and I, we have been working on some cost estimates, like per unit cost, and you're right. If we start doing any type of transport and we're going to bill, then that's going to require some additional support staff, or we're going to have to contract that out. It's probably going to be kind of a combination of both. What we have found, most area departments that do transport service on the EMS side, they have a limited number of civilian staff within the department that do some of that initial processing, and then that information is forwarded on to a third-party billing and collection service to handle. We have found there's a couple different models of those. You can contract with ones that you just pay a flat fee, a certain amount per month or per year. Others, what we found is a little bit more common model is it's their fee structure is based on a percentage of what they actually collect for you. So they have some skin in the game that the higher the percentage they collect for you, then the little bit more they make off the deal. Additionally, the last part is that if you'll remember back to when Wichita State did their first presentation, the direction that Interim City Manager Neinstedt and myself received at that time was about answering this question of what's the appropriate level of EMS service and resources for the community. So that's where the focus was. So no, there really wasn't any specific instance of looking at just the non-emergency, like interfacility transports. Yes, those are a pay-for-play type service, so to speak. Those are ones that usually most services that provide that, they've guaranteed or cemented that payment piece before that service is undertaken. Once again, that's a policy decision that you would have to make as a body if you wanted us to look into providing that service in the future.
Last question. There was one slide that said, again, I'm a little confused. One of the recommendations was that we should help develop county fire departments, because I'm assuming we're only talking about service within the city limits. So I'm a little confused as to why one recommendation is for us to assist other fire departments develop whatever they need to do.
I think I can speak to that. So currently, like they referred to in the report, AMR operates countywide. So they're running medical calls with the different township departments surrounding the city as well as the city. I do know that multiple of the county departments they're trying to ramp up their ability to provide ALS first responder service as well because of some of the issues that the system has faced. So maybe it was misinterpreted or misstated. I don't think it was that the city should be providing that. It's just that overall for the system is that it's going to improve the system overall, the more at the first responder level across the entire county, not just within the city, that those first responder agencies have the ability to provide ALS service when they arrive on scene as well.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Doder?
Thank you, Mayor. A question and then just some comments, I think. On slide 10, you refer to establish a collaborative contract, and that's underlined, representing Shawnee County and the city of Topeka with AMR, GMR. First of all, maybe you could explain collaborative contract. And then I assume because we need to establish that we don't currently have that type of contract with the county?
Councilman, yes, that's correct. Right now, there's a contract that exists between just Shawnee County and the contractual ambulance provider. The only agreement that exists within the city of Topeka is a franchise agreement that allows that ambulance provider to operate. The suggestion of a collaborative contract and the terminology that's underlined is that with the city of Topeka being the primary beneficiary of the ambulance contract and certainly the bulk of responses, was for those two entities to really hold hands and work together in future contracts to make sure that both the needs of the county and the municipality of Topeka are first and foremost.
Great, and I wholeheartedly agree with that. We've had some discussion about what do we really need, how much is it going to cost. I'm still not sure I understand the 3 ambulances down the road. In my mind, there's 3 options for us. One is we could take over, we could do something like Lawrence, Douglas County and take over EMS in this city and county. I don't think anybody's really advocating for that. That's expensive. It's going to take a long time. We could, once we determine whether we're meeting the guidelines that have been set here, and I like the 5 ALS, I think we're closing in on something that makes some sense. If we don't have that currently and in the process of negotiating a contract with Shawnee County that also makes sense, which it apparently doesn't now, we could simply pay AMR more to supply the units that we need. That's an option. And then the other option is we could do some hybrid. Still AMR, but we've got the 3 ambulances or whatever. It appears that you've kind of set up a timeline and maybe a board of experts for the most part that might help us help us answer, I guess, the questions in the long term. So, I'm thinking we established this board, which does not exist right now, correct? I know there's some kind of EMS something group that gets together, but this would be a different board, right? That's proposed here.
Yeah. So currently, Councilman, under the existing contract between Shawnee County and AMR, the county appoints a ambulance compliance officer, which is a county employee. This would be creating a board that had, the goal would be to establish a board within that contract that has representatives from the multiple different entities, as was described in there, that would collaboratively work together to oversee the EMS response in the city and the county.
So I guess what I'm seeing is step 1, get with the county and negotiate a contract or whatever it is that makes sense for us. Because you know what? City of Topeka can go hire their own EMS service if they'd like, and that would not be good for Shawnee County. So I think we have the upper hand here, and we should. Represent the most responses in the county. So let's get that contract figured out. If that leads to this board being appointed, and I like the makeup that's proposed here, I'm sure it could change a little bit. Seems like one of the duties of that board would be to figure out what our next steps are. Figure out, okay, these are the parameters that we need to be meeting for the city of Topeka. I guess as part of that, we'd have the GIS or whatever refined to the point that we can get real data out of it. And then that gives us, we're going to have experts weighing in on what we need to do to get up to that 5 ALS units at all times and beyond. And we can kind of take it a step at a time. You have second quarter, I think, of 2027 for the 3 ambulances, and I know there's other things in there as far as getting more folks certified, and I think that would, you'd be able to hit that timeline as well. So that's what I would like to see. I mean, it seems like this contract is the first thing we have to tackle. Let's get ourselves in a position that we can dictate what happens here. And, you know, frankly, if the county doesn't want to play, then let's talk about contracting with AMR ourselves or doing something different. And then get a board appointed and move on to the next steps. I still have, and this is, I think, what started for several of us, this issue. I have a problem with budgeting more and more money every year to the fire department to upgrade our EMS folks, and we need them, but ultimately we don't get paid for that because the only time you get paid is when you transport somebody. If there's a way around that, if we can figure out some way to at least get some compensation for the expertise that we're putting on each one of these units, then we need to figure that out, because we simply cannot keep upgrading the level of our EMS folks, our firefighters, and not get compensated for it. So somewhere in that timeline's got to be the realization or the recognition of that and a solution to it. That's all I've got, Mayor. Thank you.
Anyone else on the governing body? I take note of your comments, Councilman. I think probably what I'm hearing right now is that while this is a very good start, more than we've had before, that it's really important to go back now with the concerns that we've been hearing from you and others, and direct the city manager to move forward with trying to bring that collaborative effort with the considerations that have been expressed tonight and move forward with it, because I am in agreement that we need to have the coverage in this city, and we need to find a way to do it so that it's effective and doesn't break the bank for the city as well. So if I can get that as a head nod, this is a presentation, it's not a action item or anything like that right now, but I think that would be something that the governing body would like to have the city manager follow up with those experts and give us much more detail. And it's a good start effort, but I think we need to move with some more detail in that way. Councilman?
Mayor, I would just say thanks to the folks from Wichita State. Good process. Appreciated being involved in it, and well laid out recommendations from maybe not a great, not great direction at the beginning, but good process and good report. So thank you.
Yes, I want to thank you all for your presentation and the time that you've given us, because we've been talking about this for a number of years in some fashion or form. I think we're at least closer to a starting point, in my opinion. Councilwoman, did you have something?
Just a thank you also to the team. I think when we discussed this and discussed getting another round on the EMS, it was also mentioned that when we got to a point where we wanted to make some final decisions, we really needed to reactivate our master fire plan on our end to kind of have that fit in. So whatever that pacing would be, I wanted to mention that as we close out. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you
Thank
all.
you for the presentation. Okay. Agenda item number 4, the consent agenda. Madam Clerk?
A is approval of utilities engineering contract amendment between the City of Topeka and Recreation Engineering and Planning in the amount not to exceed $89,800 for engineering services. B is approval of a utilities engineering contract between the City of Topeka and Bartlett and West Incorporated in an amount not to exceed $175,000 for engineering services. C are minutes of the regular meeting, and there are no applications.
Okay, we've heard the consent agenda is read. Is there a motion to approve? Motion to approve by Councilman Dobler, second by Deputy Mayor. If you'll call the roll, please.
All right, Mayor Padilla,
Yes.
Councilmembers Hiller,
Yes.
Valdivia Aquila,
Yes.
Banks,
Yes.
Kale,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
and Hofer.
Yes.
All right, we have 9 yes, the motion carries.
Okay, move on to agenda item number 5, the action items. Madam Clerk?
A is a resolution introduced by the Public Infrastructure Committee comprised of Councilmembers Sylvia Ortiz, David Banks, and Neil Dobler, amending the 2025 to 2034 CIP and the 2025 to 2027 CIB to include project number 281361.
Mr. City Manager?
Thank you, Mayor and members of the governing body. Sylvia Davis, our Utilities Director, will take us through this item.
Director Davis?
Good evening, Mayor and governing body. Tonight, we are asking for your approval on an item that went in front of the Public Infrastructure Committee last month. They approved our request to amend the CIP-CIB to include a project for the lead and copper replacement program. Tonight, we're asking again for your approval. This will allow us to have the authority in place to tie our SRF funding, which I'll talk about in a moment, back to. So we're really setting this up, formalizing it, putting it in the CIP, so that we can then start working on those lines. With that, I am open for questions and ask for your approval.
Okay, anybody from the Infrastructure Committee want to make a comment? Councilman Dobler, Banks? The chair isn't here. Okay.
Thank you, Mayor. I actually missed this meeting, so I can't comment on the action that was taken, but I did watch the tape. And if I could ask just for you to talk a little bit, maybe this covers both A and B, just a little bit about we're talking $75 million here. It's a lot of money, and it's a federal mandate that's been in the works for a long time. Just talk a little bit about what this pays for, what we're going to do, and why we need to do it, if you would.
Sure. And I'll preface this with, we're sticking with the $74 million in this program, knowing that it's most likely going to be much less. We just don't have a good dollar amount to throw in front of you at this point, and we're still working on that. This $74 million came from our original estimate when we didn't know, we weren't for certain what we were looking at out in our system. So we're continuing to refine that through our efforts with the lead service line project that we're working on. So we did just get, we're continuing to get more information and details on the final ruling that the EPA has made on the lead and copper rule improvements. As part of that, we have a contract with a couple of consultants. Black & Veatch is leading that effort, and we have developed our lead service line inventory. And with this final ruling, we are now tasked with doing everything in our power to remove lead or potentially lead-containing lines out of our distribution system. And we know that almost all of those are really in the service lines from the city mains to homes and potential businesses, possibly schools as well. So you all know we've been trying to continue to update you guys as we move through this process, but now that we have a list of unknowns, we are tasked with verifying what those are. We're already working on that, and we've had several verified and taken off that list. We did get confirmation today that our letters will be mailed out, the company that we're using to do that, to let everybody know that they may have a lead line or potentially a lead-containing lines. Those letters are going to be mailed out today or tomorrow. That company's working with a lot of other water suppliers, trying to get the same thing, the same notifications out, because everybody's on the same time frame in our efforts to comply. I guess I'm being a little wordy here, but we have a lot of things we have to do in order to comply with this new rule. And we have approximately 3 years to develop and really finalize our plan. And then after that 3-year period, we have a 10-year compliance period. That can change. There's always caveats with this. If the state, the ruling has allowed for the states to have authority to shorten that time frame if they believe that we can afford to replace the lines that we need to in a shorter time frame. KDHE has always been very good working with us and through those things. So we're not anticipating a stricter time frame at this point, but a lot of that's still in question as we continue to refine this.
Great, thank you for that discussion. So if I could just boil this down, we know there's a lot of service lines in this city that aren't lead or copper. They're fine, we're not going to touch them. We know some that are, and we're going to need to replace them, but there's a whole bunch that we don't know exactly whether they're lead or copper. This number represents the worst case.
Correct.
And we're starting with that because the next step is to approve loans, SRF loans from KDHE. We need to get those in place. It doesn't mean we're going to borrow the money or spend the money. We're going to have it available.
Absolutely. It's really, again, setting up that framework. So just to give you another perspective, out of 57,000 customers that we have, we mailed out right at about 4,000 letters. So that's what really we're looking at today. Again, we've been trying to determine, and we've been waiting for that rule, which now says we are responsible. If we're going to touch any part of that line, we need to do everything in our power to replace the entire line, and we cannot cross that off of our system as improved until the entire service line is replaced. So looking at those numbers and what that's going to entail, this gives us that authority, and we will still continue to come back in front of you annually to get this service line work approved as we move through that. Yep.
Very good. Mayor, with that, I would move for approval.
I have, Deputy Mayor has a question. Sir?
Thank you, Mayor. Sylvia, on this, you say some of the communications have already gone out to the public?
They're in the mailing process right now.
Okay,
they have to be mailed out by the end of this week.
So a couple of things. One, I hope that you all are being very, very cognizant and intentional about the wording that you're using on your communications to our customers, because we know that there is a lot of upset with water rates, utility rates, all of that. But we also know that there has been a history of where the best line of communication in letters has not always been there with your department. And that was before you were in the position that you're in, but where it was very threatening sounding to people. Sure. It was very scary and intimidating. And I really hope that there's not any of that verbiage so people are clear what's exactly, happening. So that's one. Also, two, with this possibly up to $74 million, is there going to be any cost that the consumer is going to have to take in this replacement of the lines, or is this all on the city side?
To your first question, I will say I think I might have made this point in one of this. There's been a lot of discussions though. So we are required to use to let the letters that we mailed out. It's actually a brochure that the state is requiring every water supplier to use. So it's a standard brochure. We have updated it to include Topeka's information and our website so that they can get more data. And that's why we would really heavily encourage anybody that has questions to reach out. There's a lead service line call number on that. They can always call our call center, but we have also a dedicated line for anybody that's reaching out with lead-specific questions. But again, that's a brochure that we were required to keep standard. I don't believe it's threatening, but it is a scary topic. So I definitely anticipate folks calling you guys, reaching out for help, and we're here to help them all along the way.
Sylvia, we also added a QR code, correct, for Spanish speaking?
There is a link on that directing a Spanish version on our website. We don't know which customers need that information, and so again, we definitely want to help, but there's some language on there directing folks there.
Well, and I would just hope that if we do get calls, I'm telling you, if I get a call, it's not me that should be answering that. It's your staff that should be answering that. So I hope everybody's being trained well enough, because if it's concerning, which it definitely sounds like it is, then we have to be sympathetic to the public and the questions and the concerns that they may have. And I understand what you're saying about a state form. I'm just talking about the history that we have had with some very alarming type of verbiage. So I hope staff is ready for that. And then, so the other question about cost?
To your other question, at this point, what we're doing and planning on is for us to bear all of the cost of those service line replacements. The language in the new ruling states that the water supplier is required to replace all service lines within our control. And then it goes on to say we must do X, Y, and Z to attempt to gain control, meaning we have to ask people if we can go on their properties, touch their private service lines, and we have to ask a minimum amount of times through a couple of different methods in order to say we've made every attempt we can to make this happen for someone. But we do plan on bearing those costs. I have to throw out the caveat that depending on how long this takes and what the final number is, when we say, is there any cost to consumers, it may come in form of their rates. I mean, that's how we're funding this. So technically, yes, because we're utilizing water rates to pay for our share. But no, we're not asking them to pay for that out of their own pocket, if that answers your question.
And so you have a method in line that the attempts that you make to get onto that private property, all of that will be documented so that the city will have the proof that they actually have made those attempts.
Yep.
If you have upset residents that say, nobody ever came to me asking me anything.
Yep, absolutely. We have to formalize all of that. That's going to be in our plan, and then we will have to document that to show and be able to report back to the state.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Just really quick, and Mr. Mayor, if you wouldn't mind. But our responsibility stops at the structure, right? There may be, yes.
As the line is coming into the home or business.
So I just want to make that point that anything on the property, within the property or the structure itself, that the property owner will be responsible for that.
Yep.
Councilman Count?
I do like that you have shot high on this, and you made the comment of, it doesn't mean we're going to borrow it, doesn't mean we're going to spend it, because this is one of the things I want in 5 years with the cost of things may skyrocket in that time frame, that throws our budget into a major turmoil. So I like that you're shooting high and that you're planning for the what-ifs that might pop up in that aspect of things, because like I said, I don't want it to be where it's a budget killer 5 years down the road.
Yep.
Councilman Duncan?
I guess a couple things. I guess I need to ask about the second piece of this, even though we're on the first piece.
Sure.
Are we borrowing all this at the same time?
No.
So how does that, explain how that borrowing process works?
Okay, so we are authorized, if everything is approved on the second item, that would authorize us to potentially take out $74 million worth of loans. The state would then reimburse us half of that as we submit for those reimbursements. What we're not tasked with paying anything. No debt is incurred until we borrow that money. And so I worked through this with some responses to questions from Councilwoman Hiller earlier today. Let's say we are needing $10 million to do some of this work. We would request that $10 million. We would submit for reimbursement to the state for $10 million. They would then reimburse us back $10 million, and we would then have a statement that says we owe them $5 million, and that's what we would be borrowing and paying interest on, if that makes sense.
It does, and part of the reason I ask that is because we have almost $8 million here in contingency fees, which in theory, and knock on whatever, we won't have to spend. We could, I get that, but I mean, those are built in for any cost overruns, and so we're not having to borrow that $8 million now, and knowing that we're only getting $4 million of it back, we're able to tier that whenever we need it, and that's partly why I'm asking that a minute.
And it is a balancing act, because we wouldn't also want to borrow a majority of that early on if we didn't have a plan and we didn't know what we were replacing in 5 years. If they're giving us 13 and we know some of that isn't going to come immediately, we wouldn't want to be taking monies out and paying that upfront.
I guess the only piece of this I have some concern over is the admin costs. I mean, it's $12.5 million. I mean, is the majority of that engineering fees and design work?
There's a lot of work that has gone into the planning and efforts that are not eligible for this funding, but for the lead service line replacement program, it would be potential potholing, efforts to work on communications and outreach as we're working with schools and daycare. There's a lot of administrative fees that are going into this, but we would also be able to charge back staff time and things of that nature if necessary.
Well, I guess that's my question. How much of that is being outsourced versus work we're able to do internally? I mean, I don't want it to sound simplistic, because this is hard work, but we know how to replace water lines. I mean, we're good at it. I mean, we do it a lot. We're good at it. And so I guess my question is, how much actual engineering work and design work is really having to go into something that we pretty much are doing on I mean, and I don't want to oversimplify it, because I know that there is that level.
No, that's a great question.
And I'll tell you why, because I looked at some of the numbers we've run, and now we've done other projects, and I know none of them are as big as this to some degree, but we usually, a percentage of these projects can run, of what we spend on design and engineering and admin is in that 10 to 15% range on an average. This breaks that. This number is closer to 17% if you take the base 74 million. If you take out the contingency, it's going up to 19%, give or take. And so I'm just wondering why this is costing us more on that average that we try to keep fairly low than all those other projects. And that's why the number seems a little high to me, because it just seems outside of our normal. And I know there's exceptions, but.
Well, and again, this number was developed on a lot of worst case scenarios, but it's really program administration and coordination, complying with state as these rules. Again, all of those numbers were developed before this ruling was even finalized. We won't be doing as much actual field engineering. It's more potholing. How are we going to go about identifying the remaining of the unknown lines? We're going to have to send people out to possibly even dig up and determine what those lines are constructed out of. But then it's developing a plan and helping us put together packages to get it on the street, to having plumbers. We will have to have licensed plumbers doing this work. We cannot do this work because it's private service lines, if that makes sense as well. So it's a lot of the coordination and administration of multiple pieces that are going into complying with this rule.
No, and I'm going to support this tonight. It's got to be done, both because it's mandated by the feds, and both it's just something that needs to be done in general to help our citizens. And I can do it knowing that it does have to come back to us every year as part of the CIP, and we can take a look at that cost and see where we are next year as we go through the process and see if we've been able to reduce it or can make any adjustments.
It's a great question, and there's just still a lot of unknowns as we continue to work with them.
Thank you.
Move approval. Motion to approve. Councilwoman Hiller.
Thank you, Mayor. I have real concerns about this. Sylvia has been really responsive, thank you, with questions back and forth. But what we know for sure is we have 400 lines we need to do, looks like, on here. 400.
At least. At least.
Most of us that have had to watch those costs or have done it ourselves, $5,000 a line's pretty good ballpark. So for 400 lines at $5,000 a line, is $2 million. I appreciate the answer about the top line, but honestly, even with this high volume, if what we need to do, and again, fresh off budget, so, and thinking about ratepayers and so on, and what happens if we put this in the CIP, if it probably would only take one FTE maybe on a 3-year project or something like that to manage this. You know, once this stuff has gone out, to go back and forth, to line them up, you know, the way you all do, well, Public Works does, for instance, curb and gutter and things like that, where they're one-offs and they're small projects. You get people on a contract that isn't, you know, batch basis. We're going to give you 10, you do those, you do them well, you get another 10, that kind of thing. This looks huge right now, but based on all the unknowns, it would seem to me that we could manage the project in that way. So even if we had to do 5,000 lines at $5,000 a line, it's only $25,000. And so I'm just, I get it that we want to act fast and be prepared, but even 5,000 lines at $5,000 a line, if those are rates that we can get, we know we can get those out in the field. I've talked to some people about it. Apparently there is even something that's been developed recently where if you get a certain kind of machine that can thread the new line inside the old one and then bust the old one off and take care of it. I don't know exactly how that goes, but that's even more economy. But I just, you said there were grants possibly available as well?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah, but there's not a single indication that grant money might be what we use on here. Just feel like this needs some work and could be knocked back substantially, and with just the concept of how it would roll out, as well as how many units we're likely to do. Again, I appreciate that you said they didn't need engineering, because we don't use engineers now for people's water lines and repairs that we do under the street. So obviously it could go up in time, but I can't support this as it is with no reference to grants and seeming like for $100,000 a year we could probably manage the grant and some things like that. If it was possible to delay and have a look at it again with that feedback, if you're sure that that's the way it would go, I'm very worried about us even committing that and having to use these figures in rate making.
If I may, so the city of Topeka hasn't taken out an SRF loan for many years, up until 2022, which we then applied for an SRF loan and worked through many challenges with that because it was a new process for us. So we're learning lessons as we go, and that's part of why we're here tonight, because there's timeframes we have to meet with these public hearings and getting things on record so that we can finalize this application. I know there's concerns. Again, I'm really saying we're committing to doing all of those things, even though it might not state that in writing. But our efforts tonight are to get this public hearing on record, potentially get approval, so that we can simply complete the application process, because it can take up to 2 years to get these funds. So again, that's why we're using round numbers, and we haven't really taken a fine-tooth comb to whittle that down as much as we know we potentially could. And I hate to just say, trust us, but that's really what we're asking, because we know there's so many checks and balances before we can spend any of those dollars.
I hear you. Thank you.
Yep.
Councilman McCall, then Councilman Duncan.
Our biggest thing, I think, right now is we can't try to plan to do it on the cheap. There's a lot unknown because it's below ground, and you have no clue kind of what's getting down there, what's happening down there until you get down there. And so, like I said before, if we try to do this on the cheap, it could just kill us in the future. I mean, I'd rather shoot high and not borrow, not spend, than not have it prepared for in 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, keep on going down the line, and all of a sudden everything gets that much more expensive. There's that much more that's been discovered than previously believed. So, and then just some of the headaches that they might have to go through, just someone might give permission, then take it away, and things like that. So there could be a lot of stuff that's going on that I'd rather for us to shoot high on this project, get it done right, than try to go through it and then all of a sudden, okay, here's the bare minimum, let's get this knocked out, and have all these what ifs pop up and other problems that we're not anticipating pop up.
Councilman Duncan?
I just want to add real quick, Mayor, this is obviously a problem right now for every city, not just in Kansas, but across the United States. This is, I mean, we can talk about the needs for replacing lead lines, and I'll put that all to a side because that's true. But for a minute, we'll just talk about the practical issue, which is that it is an unfunded mandate from the federal government, and it doesn't matter that there's going to be administrative changes with the recent elections. This one's not going away. And there are very limited resources for communities to even access anything to help them pay for this. And those resources are going to go fast. And as I've looked at this, that's been my back and forth with, while I've got some concerns about the expenses, and I asked the question about, we don't have to take this all out at once, and it gives us a yearly review, is why I'm much more supportive of letting us start this process, because we are actually ahead of the curve of a lot of cities in Kansas right now. And if we can start this now, it puts us ahead of all them for in line for what limited resources will be available to us as we move through this to help us defer costs. And so that's why I think it is important that we just start this now so we can stay ahead of everybody through the process. So thank you, Mayor.
Councilman Dover, you have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve, second by Councilman Kell. We'll call the roll, please.
Councilmembers Hiller,
No.
Valdivia Aquila,
Yes.
Banks,
Yes.
Kell,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
Hofer,
Yes.
and Mayor Padilla.
Yes.
All right, we have 8 yes with Councilmember Hiller voting no. The motion carries.
Okay, thank you. Move on to 5B, public hearing. Madam Clerk.
B is a public hearing concerning a proposed loan in an amount not to exceed $74,280,000 to be taken by the City of Topeka from the Kansas Public Water Supply Loan Fund, administered by Kansas Department of Health and Environment pursuant to KSA 65163C at SEEK, and a resolution introduced by City Manager Dr. Robert Perez authorizing the filing of an application to the Kansas Department of Health and Environment regarding a loan from the Kansas Public Water Supply Loan Fund.
Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the governing body. Sylvia Davis, Utilities Director, will be here to lead us through this item as well. Thank you.
All right, as part B of this effort, this resolution is actually the resolution that is approving the SRF loan application in the public hearing to authorize that. You just approved the CIP and CIB, which now gives us the authority to spend this money once we finish this application and receive those funds. So tonight, I would respectfully ask for your consideration and approval to open that public hearing and authorize us to complete this application.
Okay, thank you. At this time, I will open the public hearing and ask if there is anyone present who would like to speak to this matter. I will open the public hearing and ask if there is anyone present who would like to speak to the matter. And for the third time, is there anyone present who would like to speak to this matter? Seeing none, the public hearing is now closed. But, governing body, if you have further comment? If none, I entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
Motion to approve by Councilman Kell.
Second.
Second one by Councilman Banks. If you call the roll, please.
Councilmembers Valdivia Aquila,
Yes.
Banks,
Yes.
Kell,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
Hofer,
Yes.
Mayor Padilla,
Yes.
and Councilmember Hiller.
No.
All right, we have 8 yes with Councilmember Hiller voting no. The motion carries.
Thank you.
Okay. Move to action item C. Madam Clerk.
C is conveyance of real estate to the state of Kansas for $3,685,887.76.
Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the governing body. Braxton Copley, our Assistant City Manager, will lead us through this item.
Good evening, governing body. This is the third part in our 3-part series relative to the fleet garage. Approximately a month ago, I came in front of you and asked for permission to purchase the mainline facility so that we have a new home for our fleet garage when the PQV project demolishes our old one. A week following that, Jason Tryon came in front of you and asked for your approval of the not-to-exceed contract with Kansas Building Services for the construction of the garage, as well as the project budget amendment from the CIP. So I'm here tonight for the third and final time, and this is to ask you to approve the conveyance of our existing fleet garage that is going to be demolished for PQV in return for a payment of $3.6 million from KDOT. For those of you who've been on the council for a while, you know that when we initially started conversations with them, the compensation was in the $2.3 million range. We've gotten that up to 3.6 for the garage. In addition, there is another potential for up to 3.1 million in federal relocation assistance, and that is only paid after we have relocated and we submit for reimbursement the documented expenses for that. So all told, we're looking at $6.7 million of this project cost being paid for by KDOT and by the federal government. And so with that, I would ask for your approval so that the city manager has the authority to execute the necessary documents to convey our existing fleet garage for $3.6 million. And happily stand for any questions that you all have.
Any questions for Assistant City Manager Copley? No? Councilwoman Hiller.
Not really any questions. Appreciate the extra time that went into the due diligence to get those numbers up with the relocation and the purchase expenses, and I would move to approve.
Okay. Motion to approve by Councilwoman Hiller, second by Councilman Kell. If you'll call the roll, please.
Councilmembers Banks,
Yes.
Kell,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
Hofer,
Yes.
Mayor Padilla,
Yes.
Councilmembers Hiller,
Yes.
and Valdivia Aquila.
Yes.
All right, we have 9 yes, the motion carries.
Okay. Motion is carried. We'll move to action item 5D. Madam Clerk.
D is approval of a 3-year labor agreement between the City of Topeka and Teamsters Local Number 696, representing street maintenance employees.
Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the governing body. Tony Trower, our Director or Deputy Director of Public Works, and Ms. Spinelli with our City Attorney's Office will lead us through this item. Thank you.
Troy.
Good evening, Mayor and governing body. Excuse me. We're here this evening requesting approval for the union contract agreement between the City of Topeka and Teamsters Union Local 696 for years of 2025 through 2027. A few of our points through negotiations was the parties have agreed to increase wages 3% in 25, 2% in 26, and 2% in 27. Starting wage at the end of probation for employees will be $20.02, which was keep us in the hiring and competitiveness. Made some clarifications and updates needed for the timelines affected by our second shift that we have. And then I want to thank Teamsters for their efforts both every day in the field and at the table, along with the legal department, HR, and finance. I thought the negotiations went very well. I believe this is a fair contract that will keep us competitive, and I recommend approval and stand for any questions if you have any.
Any questions from the body on this item? Seeing none, motion to approve by Councilman Dobler, second by Deputy Mayor Valdivia-Acala. If you'll call the roll, please.
Councilmembers Kell,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes, sorry about that.
Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
Hofer,
Yes.
Mayor Padilla,
Yes.
Councilmembers Hiller,
Yes.
Valdivia-Acala,
Yes.
and Banks.
Yes.
All right, we have 9 yes, the motion carries.
Thank you, Tony, very much. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, gentlemen. Okay, we'll move to action 5C. Bless you. Madam Clerk.
E is an ordinance introduced by the Public Health and Safety Committee comprised of Councilmembers Karen Hiller, Christina Valdivia-Acala, David Banks, and Spencer Duncan concerning pest elimination responsibilities set forth in the 2012 International Property Maintenance Code, amending 8.60.170 of the Topeka Municipal Code and repealing the original section.
Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the governing body. I will defer to Councilmember Hiller on this item.
Thank you, City Manager. We sent out something way in advance for all of you to have a look at with the idea that we really wanted to get this moved into action this evening if you were comfortable with it. What happened is that it emerged that there was was language in the way that the council had adopted the property maintenance code back in 2015 that really limited the ability of the inspectors to address pest infestation problems in multifamily units. So what you have before you is a proposal to just clarify that so that in simple terms, as it's been before, if somebody's in a unit that they totally control, it's supposed to be delivered to them pest-free, and then they're responsible for it after that, unless there are structural issues. If there is more than one unit infested, it's up to the landlord and tenant together, depending on whose fault it is that this is continuing. But language is in there that no matter what, if more than one unit is infested, the landlord is responsible to make sure that the rest of the building gets pest control. So.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. I would just say that I hope that all colleagues would be in support of this, because let me just say we are running into these challenges right now because the wording was not, correct and in line. And as we continue to expand on the changing our culture of property maintenance, and as we start to get more and more calls from a lot of multifamily dwellings, this is one of the issues that we're running into, where everything that we can tell is that there is infestation that the landlord should be responsible for, but yet they're turning the finger over to, to the tenant. And where I'm not going to name the establishment, but it's in my district, that to where services or organizations that go to help the disabled and the elderly in a particular multifamily dwelling in my district, they are not going in to service the elderly because the infestation is a problem. So this will really help what we're trying to do in the changing our culture and help the PMU unit. So I would encourage everyone to support this. We're not trying to move it fast and put the wool over anyone's eyes. It's because it's needed. Thank you, Mayor.
With that, I would move approval, and it looks like we're on deck to answer any questions. That's fine.
Okay, motion to approve by Councilwoman Hiller. Deputy Mayor is the second. If you call the roll, please.
All right, Councilmembers Miller,
Yes.
Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
Hofer,
Yes.
Hiller,
Yes.
Valdivia-Acala,
Yes.
Banks,
Yes.
and Kell.
Yes.
All right, we have 8 yes, the motion carries.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll move on to agenda item 6, the non-action items. Madam Clerk, if you will read.
A is discussion of design options for the Southwest Huntoon Street design project from Gage Boulevard to Harrison Street.
Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the governing body. Braxton Copley, our Assistant City Manager, will lead us through this item.
If I may, gentlemen, we have a lady signed up for comment on this particular item. Allow me to let her speak before we move forward with your presentation. Ms. Lassiter? Watch your purse there.
It goes with his outfit. He's going to handle that. Thank you very much. Good evening. I definitely wanted to make a comment here. Good evening, greeting to all of you. About the Huntoon Street, we definitely want to see it repaired and renewed and all of that, but we are concerned that it looked a little different than the 12th Street project. We, meaning a number of citizens and persons, we're not complainers, but we will comment. There's one area that has been built, and I believe it's called, correct me, Mr. Braxton, if I'm wrong, bulb out. There's a section going on 12th Street. The bulb out piece was a concern in that when traffic is going down there, especially in the wintertime, if there's snow, that persons might not realize that's a bulb out, and then they might end up out of the car or a wreck. So we were concerned with that. We were concerned with when it was initially established on 12th Street that they closed down from Topeka Boulevard to Gage. And some of us did make comments so that we would open up some arteries and be able to navigate down Burlingame, Lane, Lincoln, and other main streets, getting to the hospital, the library, to our churches, to our schools, and so forth. We were concerned about the closing of that street. We felt it was massive, and you kind of corrected that. So hopefully on Huntoon, we will not close down all the way from Gage to Harrison so that persons can get through there. And I realized that there was something done with the sewage or the sewer lines. I realized that had to become a part of that as well. But we are concerned about the Huntoon. We want it done. We want it done properly. We don't mind having the 2 lanes as it is, and we just like it done nicely. So, and to add, in addition to that, that we are really thankful for Tennessee Town and for those persons who participate in whatever's going on there. We just recently had a tragedy just on the border of Tennessee Town, which is not uncommon in any area, but Tennessee Town has come from the bottom to the top as far as what we're doing and the good things we're doing there. And so in addition to what I'm saying about Huntoon, our International Academy always believes in our people there, believe in when good men do evil, when evil men do something, then good men need to do better. Or we always talk about the phrase about evil, something that's going on. We are doing something good. We're getting ready to have a banquet for the International Academy to honor our grandparents in Tennessee Town and also the Arbor Court grandparents. So the investors banquet is for the International Academy, but we're honoring grandparents on the 26th of November. And I have some packets that I'm going to give to you that we can pass out. We want to also say that there are persons that are very valuable to us, and on Thanksgiving we're thankful for them. So I want you to know that we are still there, and we're going to be doing something good. Thank you again for the ARPA funds.
You're good.
Thank you,
You're good.
I like
You got
that.
a
She
minute.
said, go ahead. I like that. That's kind of when you're preaching and they say, go ahead, or amen. And when other folks get quiet, you just say, oh, I'm going to say what I'm saying, sit down. But anyway, yes, we were able to purchase our plane. We were able to get the simulators, and we were trying to get more grants. That didn't quite happen. So the banquet is about investors who have already signed up. Bankers, insurance persons have already signed up to feed grandparents for free. So we'd like anybody that's interested. Anybody else is $25, but for grandparents, it's free. Thank you very much for your time. When good men,
thank you, man.
When evil men, you all help me with that one. Somebody help me with that one. Evil men prevail, good men do something. Anyway, bless you. I'll look it up. Thank you very much.
Okay. Gentlemen, if you'll proceed.
Good evening. Just as a reminder where we are in this process, the governing body approved a design contract that was only for high-level design and public engagement. And you basically challenged us to go out to the public, engage them, get their opinions, get their input, and then come back to you all to make a decision on what the scope of the project looks like. We are here tonight. This is purely a discussion item. This is to provide you with information in terms of the options that are available to you as the governing body as to what you want the Huntoon project to look like. Just so we're all on the same page, we plan to come back to you with a design contract based on the feedback that you give us in terms of what you want Huntoon to look like. Also, as a reminder, this project is going to be funded out of the county-wide half-cent sales tax. This project is not being geo-bonded. This project is not being funded out of citywide half-cent sales tax. This is coming out of the county-wide half-cent sales tax. When we put those project estimates together, it was based on full-depth reconstruction and complete streets items in accordance with the policy that this governing body adopted back in 2009 to include complete streets items. So with that, we will, Jeff Lawley, who is the project manager for Bartlett and West, will go through the presentation, and then we will be happy to answer any questions that you all have.
All right. Thank you, Braxton. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate it. Like Braxton said, we're here to talk about what we've been up to on the Huntoon Street project from Gage to Harrison. Just to give everyone an overview of what the preliminary plan is for the project. Right now, we're in the planning stage, and we'll be there till the end of this year. Next year, whatever decision we make on how we want to move forward, we will be doing the design in 2025. 2026 we'll reserve for acquiring any temporary easements we need for construction and allowing time for utilities to move out of the way so that they will be less of conflicts during construction. And the construction would begin in 2027 and would last for 3 years, 27, 28, and 29. And not really quite sure how that would be ordered up, but it would be a 3-year construction project. One of the first things we did was do some cores in the existing pavement just to see what we're working with out there. And we did not have enough space to include all the pictures we had, but just some of the ones that were of interest were showing that there's asphalt on brick, that the concrete that is out there today is in pretty good shape. We have asphalt on concrete. And we didn't have a picture of it, but we do show there where they were able to find one of the old railroad ties for the tracks that are out there in the roadway. We don't believe the tracks are out there today, but the ties are still out there, and they were able to find it with one of the cores. So just for comparison, to see what an actual failing pavement looks like, we included one of the cores from Topeka Boulevard project that is currently being repaired, and that's a failing subgrade right there, failing concrete with the asphalt on top. Doesn't look like that on Huntoon, at least with the cores that we have. But just as a reminder that just because the cores look great, it doesn't mean that the pavement as a whole is doing well. And we've included some pictures of some areas that would need some attention along this roadway. Some more information to share is probably going to be a little bit hard to see, but from the Public Works, they've gone out there and they've done a pavement condition index for Huntoon. And for the entire roadway that we're looking at for this whole corridor, the average value is a 60. And what does that mean? That means it's right in the middle of the at-risk. That's where it's at, and we have 27 segments along here, and the segments are all different lengths, but 27 out of the 33 are in that at-risk area, and 6 of those are in the poor, and 2 more below that are in very poor, but they're pretty short sections. So just for some context about everything that we've seen, these are some numbers that we can apply to that as well and show where it's at currently. Next thing we did was to look at some safety and traffic studies for this corridor. And there's a lot of information on this slide, but some of the more pertinent ones are on the bottom side. We have shown a graphic of where we have a lot of different collisions. And it's probably not a surprise that we have a lot at Gage. We have a lot of traffic there. And it's kind of an interesting intersection with how all that traffic works with 3 of those areas, two-way traffic and only 1 leg being one way. But that's probably to be expected. Some other areas at Washburn and Lane, again, that's kind of an interesting area where we have all these one-ways coming together. And so that's another high traffic area or high incident area. It was a little interesting. We found some at Polk Street. That really didn't seem like that would be a high traffic area, but we found a number of those there as well. And yeah, basically every intersection had some type of different incidents through there. And we'll talk about that later about why we believe that is. And we also included an insert from the news item on there about the accident that happened this year that had a fatality. And we wanted to bring that to light because I don't know that we can prove that it was racing that was going out there, but definitely high speeds were involved. And it's easier to do high speeds if you have 2 driving lanes than if you have 1. It's not impossible to have high speeds with 1 driving lane, but it does make it harder. And we just wanted to bring that to light. So speaking of 2 lanes versus 1, the next thing we wanted to look at is if 1 driving lane was actually something viable, something that we could put out there and it would work now and work in the future. So on this graph, the purple line is the existing traffic that we've gone out there, our partners with WSP have gone out there and acquired those numbers to see what kind of traffic we have on Huntoon today. And we made sure that we went out there during August so that it was during school and we can capture as much traffic out there as possible. So the blue line, that would be for 1 lane. If we had 1 driving lane, what would be the capacity? And just briefly looking at that, the blue line is always above the purple line. So we always have enough capacity for the peak traffic out there on Huntoon today and moving into the future. The green line is the capacity for 2 driving lanes. And as you can see through there, that it is significantly more than what we need now and what we need moving into the future. So our recommendation moving forward, however we want to do it, would be to have 1 driving lane on Huntoon. Some more things to look at, 2 lanes versus 1 lane is just different incident points that you have at intersections when you have a 2 lane and a 1 lane. And this goes along with all the accidents we showed on the previous exhibit at all the different intersections, is that you have a significant more incident points that you can have if you have 2 driving lanes at those intersections versus 1. And these are just kind of exhibits showing where that's at. These are the numbers. So if you have 2 driving lanes and you're at an intersection, you have 618 different conflict points you could have. If you just had 1 driving lane at those intersections, you have 468. So you reduce the number of conflict points by 24%. Pretty significant with what you can do just going from 2 lane to 1, especially when you really only need 1 driving lane. Something else, 2 lanes versus 1 lane is maintenance. We're going to have to maintain these roads moving forward. And just looking at it, I mean, it's just common sense. If you have 1 driving lane, and you're maintaining that versus 2 driving lanes, you have twice as much. And for over a 40-year period, that's $6.4 million versus $12.7 million. So pretty significant over that time period. The next thing we looked at was the City of Topeka utilities that we have through this corridor. First one was sanitary, and right now they're still going through all the video and assessing their needs out there. We don't expect it to be much, and we're hoping that it would be done, whatever they need to do, in the 2026 time period, and we estimate that would be between $400,000 and $600,000. That funding is eligible to be paid for by the Shawnee County sales tax. We don't believe that it's going to have to be done by that. We believe the city utilities can do that, but it's eligible if needed. Water is a little bit of a different story. People have water out there, that is true, but the way they get water is not great, and it's a hodgepodge of different things to make all of that work out there. There needs to be a 12-inch line to be installed to help complete what we did on 12th Street. It doesn't need to be done, but that's something that would help this whole entire network, and we have other folks that can talk about that in more detail. But that's why you see such a huge variation in the water cost, $2.7 million to $6.3 million. And so that's just doing the basics, things that we need to do before we put whatever we do on the roadway, or doing what completes that whole network out there. Again, eligible for funding by the Shawnee County half-cent sales tax. Probably don't have room to fit all that in there, but it's eligible. The last thing was storm, and that is typically included with roadway costs. And for all the things that we need to do in the storm, that's around $1.5 million. And again, that's a part of the road cost and paid for by the Shawnee County sales tax. So what we've done for public involvement during this time period, the very first thing we did was had a post-construction meeting for 12th Street. We had concerns that if we had Huntoon meetings right off the bat, we'd have a lot of folks that wanted to come in and talk about 12th Street, and that's understandable. We want to hear from them as well. So we had a 12th Street meeting. We had a lot of folks come in and share their concerns and share what they liked about 12th Street, and got a lot of great information by folks that showed up at that. After that, we had a Huntoon Street community open house. We had no presentation, nothing. We just invited folks to come in, share their thoughts, concerns, what they want to see, and we documented all those different things that we were shared with from the public. After we were able to digest that and all the information we've already shared, then we had a presentation, and we shared that with the public. And one of the things we did at the end of the presentation is we offered them 3 options that we had put together, again, from all the information we gathered. The first option that we shared with them was street maintenance, that we just would repair what's out there today. We wouldn't reconfigure it. There's 2 driving lanes out there today. That's what we'd be putting back. We'd just be fixing spots in the road, some curb, some sidewalk that's not out there today. We would add that. We wouldn't do any street lighting, nothing, no side or no crosswalks, no safety improvements, nothing like that. It's just fixing the road and adding sidewalk. So we shared that with them. We told them it'd be about $7 to $9 million to do that. And out of all the folks that voted for that, 3% chose this option. I apologize, these are going to be out of order. They're in order of folks that responded and chose that option. So the next option was option 3. And that was the option to just take everything out and replace everything. But we're putting back just 2 driving lanes. We're replacing everything and starting new, but it's what we have today. 2 driving lanes. We would have a shared use path for this option, and we would have other things like street lighting and landscaping and new traffic signals. So everything else would be brand new, but we're not reconfiguring anything. We're not adding a bike lane. We're not adding separate on-street parking, which would be unfortunate because there are folks out there that need it for certain areas along Huntoon. But this one is just 2 driving lanes and everything else. And out of those responded, 20% chose that option. So the last option was option 2, and that was the one that was preferred by 77% of the folks, and it was the one that we wanted to move forward with. And that option is a shared use path, a driving lane, just 1 driving lane, a buffer, a bike lane, on-street parking, and then a sidewalk on the other end. That might seem like a lot, but we've gone through this corridor, and it will fit from beginning to end, this section. We won't have to drop anything. We won't have to switch things around. This will fit through there, and without having to purchase any right-of-way. And the cost for that would be an estimated $14.9 million in 2027 when we start construction, when we would bid this project. And the construction budget right now is $15.9 million. So that would just be for the storm, the road, all the amenities that go along with that. Wouldn't include any other utilities at that time. So that is the end of our presentation for Huntoon Street, and we would just like to hear what anyone has to say. Had any comments, questions?
Okay. Councilman Kell.
I do like the majority design there because I just, personally, when I drive through that area, I just feel like you're closed in, and it's very, very narrow. So was any of this looked at when it was raining? Because by looking at some of these pictures, it looks like there's some low spots almost that would create
ponds?
Yes. What I'm thinking of is we have a couple other streets in town where, you know, like one where I drove a bunch that before I took office, I said we need to put in drainage and at 37th in front of McCray. And it just feels like that road's just falling apart already, and it's only probably been 5 years. And even then, without the drainage and without tearing up the road, it's you're hydroplaning through it half the time. So that's one big thing I always want to sit there and look at these projects, that if we're looking at that kind of stuff, and by some of these pictures, it looks like there are some low spots like that. Are those going to be addressed with the stormwater?
So let me handle that one, Jeff. Sure. Again, what was authorized in the contract was only for high-level design, right, and public engagement, not actually getting into the design.
Okay.
But I will tell you that as part of our public engagement, in terms of engaging business owners and public, we did hear a lot of complaints about that, which is part of the reason that why we as staff are making the recommendation to go with the full depth reconstruction with that single lane configuration. Is it's going to allow us to address stormwater issues that in a maintenance type of project, we would not have that ability.
And then I just noticed when you mentioned landscaping, I noticed there's trees in the easement. Is that something that would actually be planned on? Because I just look at something like that and I see tearing up your sidewalk sidewalks with roots, you're tearing up your road with roots, you're possibly damaging any utility lines underneath it. Plus also, as you put out earlier, there's a safety issue on one aspect. Someone loses control and a giant tree in 10 years is right there, and you smack a tree, you stop real quick, rather than maybe maneuvering through that area. I'm just not a big fan of putting trees in easements.
So I will tell you that the opinions expressed by people are impossible to guess, and they are wildly divergent. You have some we'll use 12th Street as an example. You had some people with mature oak trees that wanted us to cut them down. You had other people that didn't want us to plant new trees, others that did. I mean, it was across the board. So it's not a one-size-fits-all. We absolutely work with the residents in terms of to the extent that we can. Sometimes it may be that a tree has to come down to be able to fit the geometry of it, but certainly we work with them. We also are very careful in terms of what type of tree in what application. We would not plant a tree over a sewer line or a water line. We would not necessarily plant a large tree in a 5-foot wide grassy patch. Instead, we would go with a smaller ornamental tree. So there's a lot of science that goes into that in terms of selection, and necessarily we need to be flexible and to work with people to address their concerns and their desires.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I appreciate that response, Paxton, because while you're doing the improvements, people are going to live with that, and they like the aesthetics as well. They don't want to, I don't feel like they're living on a freeway anywhere, but I think consideration for that and the types that you would put in, some landscaping does complement the neighborhood and makes it a livable space. So I appreciate your answer on that. Councilwoman Hofer.
Okay, I was looking at option 3 versus option 2. First thing is you show a road width of 31 foot on option 2, and it is only 26 foot on option number 3. Why the difference?
The difference is in there to add the different options for, on option 2, the parallel parking, the bike lane, the buffer. That takes up more space, and so that's where you get the added width.
So where's that 5 feet coming from? Is it coming from the people's property?
It is not coming from people's property, no.
So where's it coming from?
It'll be coming from the green space back behind the curb that exists today.
Okay, then how are you going to put in a 5 foot and a 10 foot shared use path when they're already getting that green space taken away?
That's a good question. It'll be taking away the green space, but it will not be taking away their property.
But that 10 foot, especially the 10 foot shared use path, some of those people do not have big front yards, big side yards. I can see spots where it's going to be literally right up near their house. So how are we going to explain that to them? Because I know there's people who did not come to any of these meetings, and they don't understand this. So how is that going to work? I mean, I realize the street, when you go from Gage almost to Westboro Mart, that's wider than almost any section of the entire rest of the project. You get down by Collins Park, I know some of the houses on the south side, they have large front yards. You go to the other side of the street, a little bit further to the east, and they don't have large front yards. And generally, the shared use path is on the north side of the street. So how are we going to explain it to them? Well, sorry, we're going to take most of your yard, and then you're responsible for getting the snow off of it and maintaining it. I mean, this is a lot for some of those homeowners. So how do we deal with that?
For the 12th Street project, we had a lot of these conversations, and
I wasn't on here, so I missed up.
yeah, just snow was a big one, and that was a great question. I don't know that we ever had to go as far as policy or change anything at the city, but one of the things we talked about was just maintaining 5 foot of the 10 foot walk. And that would be something fair and reasonable. That's what everybody else to do that has a sidewalk. It's not reasonable for them to be maintaining 10 foot, but that was just conversations we had. I don't think that ever went anywhere, but that was something we discussed for that. And as far as the different walks and the sidewalks and shared path getting closer to homes, we had a lot of those conversations as well on 12th Street, especially from Gage to Cambridge, because that situation that you're discussing was right there. We are right up in front of their homes. We had a lot of discussion with those folks about that, and we didn't have a shared use path through there. We just had sidewalks because of that issue. And we had a lot of folks, too, that have garages that abut the roadway, and in order to park in front of their garage, they can't park on the sidewalk. And so something that we would do is we would swing the sidewalk up to the road so that at least we can make sure that they could park in front of their garage and have a reasonable distance to do that. And I'm not gonna say we hit every single person that had that situation, but we talked to a number of folks, went to their homes, walked out there, showed them what we'd be doing, painted lines, and had those discussions with everyone that we could to let them know that this is what we're doing. Does this work for you? Can we do some changes? Sometimes we have a 10-foot wall coming through, we'd make it skinnier, 8 feet to give them more room. So we didn't just blindly go through there and just run what we wanted to do. We went through and made sure that if there's going to be any issues like that, we did our best to contact the landowners and talk with them about what we were going to do.
Well, I can think of, there is one home in particular has a stone veneered garage, and I can't remember, it's near Boswell somewhere.
Yeah.
There is not much room from the street to that garage door. And they do have a sidewalk, but they literally have almost no room to maneuver, let alone get out of the driveway. It's one of the few that actually has a driveway entrance onto 12th Street. So I don't know if anyone has ever talked to them, but I'd be concerned for them. And a lot of people use their driveway as their secondary parking spot. Family comes over, that's where they're going to park. And we're going to tell them, no, you can't park on your driveway where we've got the shared use path. That's asking a lot of anyone, especially, I hate to bring it up, but what we're paying in property taxes. So it's not going to make people happy. So I am a fan of doing the water line all the way. We desperately need to do that. And I assume that cost is not included in, say, the $15.9 million budget that was separate. So it's on top of that and hopefully out of the county sales tax.
That is correct. The water line, the complete reconstruction of the water line is not included within that option 2 or option 3 total project cost. That would be complete streets and storm sewer.
Okay. In this case, because of, and it is an older part of town, so streets were not originally built that wide. I just can't see that 10-foot shared use path being feasible to put in that neighborhood at all, except maybe where I'm not sure where you've got extra space, like at Grace Med. There's plenty of room there to do it. So I am somewhere between, I'm not a fan of the single lane road, and you know that I'm not a fan of the bump outs and the problems we've had with the fire trucks. I'm sure UPS trucks, school buses, they all hit it, and it's caused problems. And I agree with Sandra, snow, if you can't see it and you don't know it's there, you may have trouble with your tires. You may have a lot of car damage. So I'm not set on either one of these. I think it needs to be somewhere in between. That's all I've got, Mayor.
Yeah, 1.5 miles. Councilwoman Ortiz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think the landscaping is great. My only question is who is going to maintain it? We've had areas, I know in my district and when I represented Oakland, and they say, oh, we're going to do it, and it's never gotten done. And then before you know it, it's weeds. So who will maintain that?
So the grassy patch from back of curb to the sidewalk is the responsibility of the homeowner to keep that mowed. If we plant a tree in those cities' right-of-way, the city is responsible for the maintenance of that tree through our forestry division.
And the homeowners are aware of that? Or,
Based on how busy my forestry guys have been the last couple of years, yes, I would say that the general rule is that homeowners are aware that if it's a city tree, that they can call the forestry department, and they're responsible for that tree. And if it needs to be pruned, my forestry guys will do that. If it needs to be removed, we will do that at no cost. If the tree is not in the city's right-of-way, it's the responsibility of the homeowner, but we would not plant trees on private property as part of this project. It would absolutely be limited to the city's right-of-way.
but you talked about the grass, Braxton. Are they familiar that they're responsible for that? Maintaining it, the homeowners?
I believe so. I can only think of one case where a property owner took it to the administrative hearing officer claiming that they were not responsible, and the administrative hearing officer made the finding consistent with Kansas law that they are responsible for maintaining and cutting the grass in that grassy patch, even though it's in the right-of-way, just like they're responsible for maintaining a sidewalk that is in the right-of-way.
Okay, let me try this a different way. Was that explained to them at the meeting that they're responsible for that?
But I don't believe that question ever came up in one of the public engagement meetings that we had.
I think that would be very important. I really do. Because I can take you to some parts of town that it doesn't get trimmed, it doesn't get taken care of, but the city said they were going to take care of it, and that didn't happen. So I think as a property owner, I would like to know what I'm responsible for, because I'm just going to assume. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Great suggestion, and as we get into design and get into engagement, we can make sure to stress that fact that any new turf that goes in needs to be mowed by the property owners, and we can also stress the fact that any tree that goes in would be responsibility of the city.
I would appreciate that. I'm just going to say this. We've changed things so much. First, it's the property owner's responsibility, then it's the city's, and then we've changed it back. So I think we need to be very, very clear on that. I'm even confused. That's why a lot of times I call you and say, what about this? What about that? Because I'm even confused, because we've flip-flopped so much. So I think that's very, very important when we're doing Huntoon. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilwoman Hiller.
Thank you, Mayor. Not really any questions. I just wanted to make sure I attended all of them. I think Marcus did too. I know he's online tonight, but y'all did a really good job of getting the input, first about 12th Street, and then the sequence the way you did it for Huntoon. I really appreciate some of the numbers that you put in these handouts as well. I think all of us kind of wonder about going from 2 lanes to 1 lane, and what does that mean, and what are the good parts of it, and what might be downsides if there are. And I really appreciate all the detail that you gave us in this presentation. I know that it's not part of maybe this preliminary. Mrs. Lassiter touched on it, but I think there's been assurance all along that this would be done in phases, and there would be some cleanup behind the phase that was just finished as we move on, so we don't end up with a 3-year catastrophe like we had in the Tennessee Town area, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So I think without it necessarily being part of this, the final design there's a commitment to come through. Much appreciated as well. Thank you.
Anything further? Appreciate the presentation. I think there's been a lot learned from the time we did it on 12th Street. It sounds to me that the engagement with the public has been the first thing right out of the chute that you did, or maybe not you specifically, but that was done with the public that has helped move this forward. So I appreciate that we've learned from the first time we did it. I know I traveled that road, and I like it. I don't hear people complaining. It seems like the best way to get from one side to the other side of town. I don't see any really congestion or anything like that, so whatever you can do to take into considerations expressed this evening by council and anything from the public, I would appreciate it. If no further questions, or thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Move to agenda item 6B. Madam Clerk.
B is discussion regarding the 2025 City of Topeka legislative agenda.
Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the governing body. I would look to Councilmember Duncan and to Whitney Damron, our city lobbyist, to help lead us through this item.
Okay, in this, on this piece as well, I have somebody signed up to speak from the public. If you'll allow me to call him forward. Oh, okay. Mr. Vogel? Okay, the gentleman who signed up was Steve Vogel. Can you hear us, sir? We cannot hear you.
Can you hear me?
Can now, yes.
Can you? Okay, thank you. Good evening. My name's Steve Vogel. I'm the president of the Shawnee County Landlords Association. I want to speak on one of the items in the 2025 legislation agenda. It is under housing. It's, quote, giving support for legislation allowing cities to require mandatory inspection for landlords, end quote. I think this is a bad idea. The National Apartment Association's position on this reads in part, quote, rental housing inspection laws place an unnecessary hardship on owners and infringe on personal property rights. NAA encouraged policymakers to consider other proven approaches that target chronic code violators, such as complaint-driven property inspection programs, end quote. The latest U.S. Census data that I could find says there are just over 54,000 households in Topeka with an average of 2.24 persons per household. 41% of these households are rentals. That equates to about 22,250 rental households. Do the math. I don't know what your plan is, if any, for these mandatory inspections, but if you are talking about inspecting thousands of properties, it is going to be so expensive that it will necessarily require the cost to be passed on to landlords, who will pass the cost on to the tenants in the form of higher rents. If you require an inspection before a tenant moves into a property, it will often cause a delay and unnecessary hardship for the landlord and the tenant. How are you going to deal with non-compliance? The city already has a bad reputation for how they deal with chronic code violators. I suggest the best approach is use the tools you already have, a complaint-driven inspection program, and put the focus on encouraging tenants to report violations to the property maintenance unit. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Whitney? Who else was joining you, Whitney? Was it just you?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. When you're ready, sir.
Thank you, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, members of the governing body, and members of the municipal staff. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. I know you have a proposed legislative agenda that was put together, I believe, with Councilmember Duncan and others. I've had the opportunity to go through it with your legal counsel, Amanda Stanley. I can walk through the items enumerated in the proposed ordinance, or I can respond to questions, however you would like.
Mayor?
Councilman Duncan?
I'd like to go through a couple things real quick, and then anyone can ask Whitney questions after that, whether he thinks they're reasonable or not, I guess. But half of this is not new from last year. So I'm not going to talk about anything that we've already adopted or approved or previously had on the books. I just want to highlight a couple things that are somewhat significantly different. There are a couple provisions relating to sales tax and property tax. The sales tax piece is just specifically asking the state to essentially stop exempting local sales tax, to only exempt when they make exemptions for the state portion, and let us continue to retain our local sales tax, because that's a continual erosion of the tax base, which pushes us more towards property tax, which we're all trying to get away from. And they can do that. Property tax is asking sort of two things of the state. First is to just look at the property tax system in general. It's time for them to look at their processes, which the counties have to operate under to some degree. It needs changes, and those changes need to occur. And the second piece of that is it's asking them to hold themselves to the same standards that we're held to, i.e. if they're going to demand we cut mill levies, they should probably do the same. And if they're going to hold us to revenue neutral rate hearings, then they should also do the similar. So those pieces are new. We have added something as it relates to firefighter helmet cameras. There's been some discussion at the state level, and there will be again as it relates to some of the footage and how we manage that locally, because it should be treated differently than body cam footage. And so there needs to be some clarification on the law on the state level. We've added supporting a law enforcement officer age requirement change. You still have to be 21 years of age. We're not asking the state to change that. We are asking them if somebody could enter the academy at the age of 20 and they're going to be 21 by the time they would actually be on the street, to allow that to occur, so they don't have to have their 21st birthday. They can just get in, 6 months go by, they're 21, they've graduated, they can hit the street right away. There's a piece in here from the MTAA asking us to recognize that Topeka is located in an ideal location, and there's some incentives that the state has. It's us encouraging those incentives to come to Topeka before they go to some other communities. There's also the Crown Act. This was actually asked for by our Human Relations Council, I believe. Anyone that's supporting legislation at the state level, creating a respectful and open world for Natural Hair Act, has been presented several years to the legislature and not gone very far, but we would be willing to support that if it comes back again. And I want to address the housing piece that was just discussed. There are currently laws in place. This is the last new thing. There are currently laws in place, both at the state level, some at the federal level, that essentially say we can give individuals public funds, and then we're really not allowed to do certain levels of follow-up, whether that's inspections or whether that's other tools that we use. It's our belief that if you're going to take our money, it should not come with no strings attached. We should not be giving money to landlords who then turn into some of our worst landlords. And we think that occasionally happens. This would allow us to pursue some of those barriers and break them down, so that when we give public funds, it gives us some more freedom to actually do better inspections and follow-ups and hold those folks a little more accountable. That's a very broad scope of what's would be much more thin legislation, but we've seen this in a couple instances recently in Topeka, and if we could have gotten in there sooner, we wouldn't have had some of those problems. And it's really as simple as that. So I understand the concern we just heard, but I want to stress it only applies to if you take public funds. It is not us advocating that we want to go inspect every rental house. If we're going to have that conversation, that'll be a different conversation for a different time, and we'll make sure we have that one publicly. But I want to stress that right now we're just focused on if you take public funds. So if you don't want to be inspected, don't take our money, and that's okay. So that just allows us to follow. So those are the new things in here. That's a very quick overview of some very specific pieces in here. But I did want people to know about the new stuff that was in this year's legislative agenda. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to say kudos to the Policy and Finance for bringing this up to us. I think that you can continue to see the seriousness, the on-point aspect of our legislative agenda, especially over the past 3 years. I think there's really been a lot of needed depth added and complexity with the number of issues that we're facing here at the city level. And I totally agree when it comes to housing. I think that we are trying to dig ourselves out of a hole with the way that we handle some of the housing crises that we've had. And, I'm going to say specifically, well, I'm not going to say it, but we know that they're out there. Anyway, the other thing, though, is I want to know from whoever and we really need to be serious about getting on board with our Shawnee County, what is it? The
legislative body.
Legislative body to sit down with them and discuss, what our legislative agenda is. I don't know. I think at the GTP breakfast the other day, there was also talk about the county and the city working better together. Could this be something that could be dialogued with the county about? Because what we're doing, we understand what we're trying to do, is we're trying to create coalitions and we're trying to create a stronger voice for Topeka. So I don't know if that's Whitney getting that going. I don't know if that's policy and finance. Whitney, is it you?
I'd offer some comments. So we had this conversation in the last week between city council or legal counsel and myself. So Monday, December 9th is essentially the day in the State House where they ask groups to come in 15-minute increments. The city of Topeka is on the agenda that date for 15 minutes starting at 9:30. MTAA is at 9:45 and so forth, and throughout the day you've got Washburn University, the local schools, Shawnee County itself, and others. And so it was post-election. We reached out to the chair of the delegation and said that the city of Topeka, Shawnee County, Greater Topeka Partnership would be interested in perhaps a more extensive meeting to go through our respective agendas. It was requested we wait until after that December 9th meeting, and then if there's specific matters that are kind of the leading issues, discuss with who would probably be the new chair of the delegation. I think it flips this year, of putting something like that together, whether it's prior to the session or very early in the session.
So we're looking at something then, for sure. And is there, go ahead.
I just also wanted to let you know, I think it's helpful for the governing body to know that we spend a lot of time pre-session meeting with every single one of our delegates. So our senators and our representatives, anybody that will meet with us unless they refuse. We go to coffee, we go over the agenda, we talk about bills, we reach out during session to make sure that our delegation really understands. And they're pretty honest with us on where they can have an impact and where they can't. And so we really do try to make sure to get in front of as many as we possibly can.
You have a better opportunity to get more of them, quite frankly, if you do something in the State House, as opposed to some kind of an off-site location. I know MTAA talked about doing something there. That's a long distance for legislators, and it takes quite a bit of time to have a meeting out there, or even downtown at the chamber, or somewhere in a municipal building. And so I know historically the chair of the delegation has been receptive when something is important, something is critical, whether it's Polk Quincy Viaduct, docking, KDHE, and so forth. We had some of those meetings in the State House, and you get a pretty good turnout for that, for at least a portion of it, as people come in. And so I think those options are available as well.
Well, so I think that you would hope that they would know, not only our delegation, but all legislators as a whole, is a lot of what is in this legislative agenda is happening across almost every municipality in Kansas. So, I mean, I would hope that that would add more oomph to it, but I really also hope that we continue to see, I'm not saying like a negative aggressiveness, but just a push to make sure that Topeka's voice is heard. So, thank you, Mayor.
In this agenda, one of the issues is supporting League of Kansas Municipality priorities. The League, on their cover page of their stated priorities, they've got a multiple page document, but there are 7 items enumerated as their lead priorities. 5 of those 7 are in our document that you have in front of you. The 2 that are not are water conservation issues and a capers issue. So, we're pretty consistent with what the League's looking at. From a broader perspective, obviously, we've had supermajorities for the Republicans in the House and the Senate for the last several terms. That's going to continue forward into 2025, even greater than it has been before. Quite frankly, what that gives is more flexibility for veto overrides. That could be very critical to some of the things of interest to municipalities. The leading issue being talked about by at least the Republicans on the House and the Senate side is a reduction of property taxes. who collects property taxes by and large, municipalities, school districts, and so forth. So what they propose to do in that regard remains to be seen. They're talking about things. There's no concrete ideas coming forth, but we've seen what they've tried before, which you have to live with those revenue neutral rates. We've had talks about tax lids and so forth, and I know in here there's talking about some kind of a changes to the reappraisal process and so forth, and that could become a part of it as well. We've seen legislation that virtually all the municipalities have come out and opposed that would provide tax benefits to those deemed to compete with public sources, cities and counties, whether it's auditoriums, public venues, and the like. Those have gone to the governor repeatedly during the last 6 years of this governor's term, and she's vetoed every bill that's come to her desk. She may not be able to veto or sustain an override going into 2025, so we may see some things like that that could impact local units of government. I know a concern if that kind of legislation gets on the books, then cities and counties are going to have a difficult time trying to negotiate similar proposals with entities that might want to build some kind of a swimming pool or an auditorium or an event center or a space that is publicly subsidized because of everyone else in, say, the footprint that would be affected with their property taxes and so forth. And so it's extremely problematic, and there's a reason the bill's been vetoed every time the governor's seen it, but it could come back.
If I can offer, Deputy Mayor and Whitney, we have had invitations to our Shawnee County delegation before here in Topeka, and we had some turnout from everybody. It was a pretty good representation. We even included some of the mayors from the smaller cities in Shawnee County to bring them in on the discussion to talk about having a joint voice on the things that were being brought to the legislature. And recently there was a regional effort to do that. So we are trying to make that voice a unified voice. And there is still that continued effort to try and collaborate and present our best case with everybody involved, and not somebody doing their case, then somebody else doing their case, trying to be more coordinated in that effort. So we are trying to bring that together. Spencer was in that one meeting as the employee with the League of Municipalities. I think it went well. It was their first start. The city manager was also there. And it was brought in the biggest or largest 5 counties in the state so that we could have that voice. So we are trying to collaborate and coordinate with our efforts.
Be happy to respond to any additional questions. Thank you.
Councilwoman Hiller.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to compliment the committee and you. I think this is a great agenda. We often don't see it again, and before advocacy starts, so I wanted to make a couple points on some of the sections that are fairly wide open, just for the record and with everybody here. On the one on unfunded mandates, and you mentioned Polk Quincy a little earlier. I sure hope, and there's refreshed conversation amongst the Shawnee County delegation as well as the chamber about helping to see what we can do, even on the current section of Polk Quincy, still getting some of that $20-some million of unfunded mandate covered, and we've got 2 more sections coming up. So that one, and of course we talked about lead pipe removal a little earlier, so those are 2 that I think of right off that I sure hope are specifically active on the agenda this year. On the property tax valuation, great discussion about getting city and county together first, but an issue that we've been facing on changing our culture of property maintenance and doing our best to get all the ducks in a row to address vacant properties is the issue of zeroing out the value of buildings that have been vacant for a while, which then takes away that they're costly for us to take care of when they're vacant long-term, especially if they've been vulnerable, and it takes away the incentive of those property taxes accumulating for those owners. And so if that could be looked into, if there's no way to change that, even if there was an ability to charge a payment in lieu of taxes instead of those taxes on a vacant property, at least one that doesn't have good history of being secured. I think I want to just throw that out at this point. And on the housing one too, I appreciate the response to Steve's comments as far as the mandatory inspections. I think this is a little, I just wanted to comment that where the language says we support legislation allowing cities to require mandatory inspections for landlords accepting public funds. And when I read that, I thought, well, who is that? And if that's public housing or project-based Section 8 or Section 8 certificates, all of those programs have staff assigned to them to do annual inspections, and we can go in on request or on something we observe. So I'm not sure what the problem is there. I mean, there's no harm to have it in there, but I'm not sure that there's really a problem with that. And on the next item in that sentence, strengthening protections for enforcement of equitable interest in contract for deed arrangements, we have been addressing that and changing our culture of property maintenance as well. I know Amanda's been looking into it, and hopefully we can get her opinions back. The idea of making sure, if it's not already in the law, that the same disclosures for the inspections of the condition of the property that are required in a typical sale are also required in a contract for deed, so that disclosure has been made and the responsibility is clearly on the seller to have it disclosed or taken care of any problems. And we've also looked at making sure that we have problems that we've been dealing with where the issue is this really a contract for deed or is it a lease? Yes or no, it's hard to tell. That perhaps considering something that would say if you haven't registered it with the Register of Deeds, then we don't consider it a full contract. We've been trying to protect people from retaliation and losses in substandard maintenance situations, and the contract for deed thing has come up. So I really appreciate this being on there. We hopefully can have run it through the land bank folks as well as us before we move forward on it, so that we know and can support it as well. And that's it. Just wanted to make some comments.
Deputy Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. I just have a question. What are you saying about the housing? You're saying that you really don't believe it should be in there because they have inspectors that can go in there and inspect? Can I get clarification on that, Councilwoman?
Sure. I mean, THA does annual inspections on Section 8 vouchers.
Right.
And there also is an inspection process for project-based Section 8 when people's are renewed. And so it's built into those systems already. So I just wasn't quite sure what we were trying to get to.
Okay, because then you have like these HAP contracts that HUD has, and we all know the multifamily dwelling that completely fell between the cracks, and there we're supposed to go in and inspect, and there was complete failure since the 1980s on that part. Kansas Housing Resource Corporation dropped the ball on it completely, and so I guess I didn't know if that's what you were referring to too, because they could go in and do inspections, but they failed miserably at them.
Councilman Duncan has.
Yeah, we'll triangle here real quick. So the first thing I'll say is when we write this stuff, one of the fine lines we try to balance is not getting too specific, but also making sure we're specific enough that when Whitney's sitting up at the Capitol and something gets introduced, he doesn't have to run back to us and say, is that what you meant? He knows, no, this falls within the scope and the intent, and he can point to that. So that's sometimes why we write these to be clear, but also we don't go into every dirty detail. But to that point, I think Amanda can sort of give you a little more specific reasoning.
So under state law, we are preempted from requiring mandatory internal inspections in properties in Kansas under Kansas state law. You have to get consent of the tenant, which I think, as we found, can be very complicated as you try to convince people that they aren't going to be retaliated against and allow them in. But to the deputy mayor's point, what we have found is, yes, there are federal programs that require inspections. But what happens is HUD is overworked and they contract out those services, and the contract doesn't say that they have the right to inspection, and they can't contract it out to us, and nobody is inspecting these houses that are getting federal funds. Or they're inspecting 2 units and the rest of them aren't, and then our property maintenance staff is spending hours and hours and hours of their lives going in and convincing residents to allow them in to inspect. And this isn't just one time that this has happened in Topeka. We're seeing it over and over again. And when you do sit on these calls with the federal agencies, as we've had the privilege of doing, it very much is, we don't have resources, we don't have time to inspect it. No, we can't give you our rights to inspect. Yes, we could inspect, but no, we're not going to. I mean, so without a change in the law, we can't require those apartment complexes to allow us in for mandatory inspections when we're getting these kind of complaints.
Okay. Thank you. Good information. Thank you for the clarification. Anything else for Whitney? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Okay, we're moving now to public comment. We have one gentleman, there he is, Chance Lammer, who signed up for public comment.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor Padilla and fellow council people. I want to make this short and sweet. I have enjoyed the meeting tonight. One thing I will say is that we have an amazing fire department, and they really make the constituents proud of what they do. Additionally, I know that there's a big decision coming up for our city manager regarding the selection of a new police chief, and I would like to say, as a constituent of the city of Topeka, that I think Major Klump would make a good police chief for the city of Topeka. That concludes my comments. Thank you, council members, and thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on now to the announcements. Madam Clerk?
For the November 19th council meeting, we will have 4 board appointments. We'll have 2 presentations, one on the Jayhawk Theater, the second one on the Finance 2024 year-end preliminary report. Consent agenda, we will have 2 expenditure ordinances, and then the action item, we will have the resolution on the 2025 legislative agenda, and we will have a discussion on the Dynamic Core TIF District, the removal of some neighborhood revitalization program properties.
Thank you. City Manager?
Nothing for me, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Councilman Dobler?
I have nothing, Mayor. Thank you.
Councilman Duncan?
Nothing tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay. Councilwoman Hofer?
I just wanted I went to the graduation for the latest Fire Academy class, and I wanted to congratulate the following 5 gentlemen: Levi Anderson, James Bartlett, Larkin Downing, Chance Holthouse, and Hayden Hunt. It was very nice to see them graduate, and this gets us up pretty close to, we're not quite to capacity, but we're getting closer. And I know that they appreciate when we come out to see them and show the city support. So any chance you get and you can go to one of these ceremonies, the new graduates really, they do appreciate it. And it's nice to see the new blood coming into the city. And I ran into one at one of our new police officers at our, what do I call it? It was the benefits fair. And I asked her how she was doing, one to make sure
things were going well, and it was nice to be able to see her and ask her and see how she was doing and encourage her a little bit more, because we put a lot of time and effort into all of our trainees, and we want to keep them for a good long time. That's all I have.
Thank you. Councilwoman Hiller.
Just two things. One, if people didn't see it, I wanted to send some kudos your way, Mayor. I thought you did a great job representing the city at the State of the City breakfast last week. He's probably a pretty good candidate for stand-up comedy, if anybody didn't know it. He and Commissioner Cook, quite the stand-up duo. But it was good, so good job.
Thank you.
Other than that, now it's dark early again. On my way to the meeting this evening, I passed not one but two bicyclists who did not have headlights. One of them I almost hit because I was pulling forward to turn right and came right in front of me, and then the next one I saw as well didn't have a headlight. I wondered if maybe there could be a collaboration with the police department, no extra initiatives and so on, but come up. I know there are sources both for veterans and others for free headlights and reflectors for bicycles. And if there couldn't be an initiative to simply put a list together of resources of where people can get that help, and then have a routine of simply stopping with a courtesy check any cyclist that doesn't have a headlight and proper reflectors, and give them a list of where they could get them. At least a warning sort of thing. Tremendous safety. Nobody wants to hit a cyclist or see him down. Thanks.
Deputy Mayor.
I have nothing.
Councilwoman Ortiz.
Don't hit them, Karen. Your insurance will go up.
I don't know. That too.
I just want to say a happy belated Veterans Day, and if you've served like the mayor has served, I want to say personally thank you to all of those that have served, that are serving, or plan to serve. I also want to apologize to my colleagues for being late. I attended a soccer banquet for my grandson, number one grandson, so he's a senior this year, and I haven't been to a banquet as long as he's been on the team, so I thought it was very important. So I apologize. I'll watch the tape and get caught up to speed. Thank you.
By the way, Councilman Kell had his own float in that parade too. Yeah, he's a Navy vet. Councilman Banks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to give a shout out to my youngest grandson, who football team has been undefeated for 3 years. And in the Sunflower Flag Football League, they give what they call Super Bowl rings. And he's gotten that ring, and he knows his grandpa has been pretty popular on the basketball circuit. So he always comes to me since he's gotten that ring, and honestly, it looks like a real ring. And he says to me, he says, "You've been to the Super Bowl, but you didn't win." And I'd just like to give a shout out to his efforts in their basketball game last Saturday. He had 25 rebounds. And I mean, he played the whole game, but he was really an energetic kid. And I just wanted to say I am so proud of him and give him a shout out. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Good deal. Yeah, I should. Councilman Kell.
So it's an imaginary ring because it said it looks like a real ring.
It's a real ring.
I just want to say happy birthday to the Marine Corps. This last Sunday was the 249th for the USMC, or as I call them, Uncle Sam's Misguided Children. Happy Veterans Day to all my fellow veterans. The Veterans Day Parade was fun. It's the second or third year I've done it. And it's always fun to just go through and mainly the funnest part for me is just hanging out in the line waiting to go. And I get there probably about 8:30, and just all of us talking and sharing stories and things like that. So that's kind of the fun for me, is just kind of seeing all the other veterans and comparing how our life was in the military. Finally, we had 3 events at the hotel this, about 10 days ago or so. every day the events got more and more people to attend, and it was in conjunction with Halloween, and the United Rodeo Association was at Domer, and communication staff did a great job planning it, putting it together, being there. I know myself, the city manager, Councilman Miller was there one night. So it was just really fun to get out and try to have something for the citizens of Topeka to do. I just try to think when the last time there was a Halloween party anywhere near Topeka, and it's been forever since a lot of the bars quit doing them. So it was really fun getting that done, and then just doing something for the hotel, for the people staying there, but also for the citizens to go to. It was, like I said, every night kind of, once the word got out, the attendance went a little bit more and more, and I think we should have some more events planned, so we're going to be looking at that. And I know a lot of ideas were thrown out over the last, but I think it's a good way to bring some more income into the hotel and also serve our guests. Another great aspect was having smoky dunks out there. The rodeo people loved it. The hotel guests loved it. It was a great place for them to grab something, since the hotel doesn't serve dinner. So I think when we have a full booking, I think that would be a good idea, having a food truck or two scheduled to be out there for our guests to be out there. And to me, that's just going to drive our value up. So when we do sell this, we're showing that what the possibilities are, and rather than just saying we've held on to it, we've taken care of it, but showing the possibilities, I think is going to be the great thing with the hotel. Thank you.
Councilman Miller, are you still online?
I am sorry, but not in one place to be able to hear you. And thank you very much.
Thank you. I have an announcement I want to get to before we move on to our executive session. And this is a request to the citizens of Topeka and the governing body. I think you've heard me talk about this. The governing body is seeking 5 civically minded individuals who shall be representative of the city as possible to serve on the Citizen Government Review Committee. This committee is tasked with studying and reviewing the City of Topeka's form of government and making recommendations to the governing body for amendments and modifications. The mayor's office is accepting applications for the committee until Monday, December the 2nd. There are some qualifications, but I think everybody pretty much is going to meet them. The person must be a registered voter that resides within the city limits and be available between January and June of 2025 for a substantial time commitment to meet and complete the required report to the governing body. In addition to the qualifications, it is preferred that applicants have a basic understanding of the city's current form of government, demonstrate the ability to be impartial and objective, and possess sound communication and listening skills, as well as lead and function well in a group. Applications will be accepted until Monday, December the 2nd. Applicants can apply online, and there is a link here, www.topeka.org/mayor/boards-commissions. topeka.org/mayor/boards-commissions. Or you can call the mayor's office, 785-368-3895, or email the mayor's office at mayor@topeka.org. Provided sufficient applications are received by December 2nd deadline, 5 appointments will be considered for approval by the governing body on December the 10th, and the resolution convening the committee will be considered for approval by the governing body on December 17th. Today, I don't know that we have received any persons who have stepped forward. So if you are visiting with your council person and you believe this is something that you would like to do, it is a volunteer effort. It's not a paid position. It does require a lot of your time. But it's important that we have your involvement in this review. I've looked at some of the comments that were made the last time this was done, about 10 years ago. And it was interesting to see some of the things that were brought up. some of those citizens are still in Topeka, and maybe they want to come back again, but I would like to see a mix with new eyes and people to get involved. So I encourage the citizens of Topeka to think seriously about this. Call my office, get a hold of your council member. However, try and get your name in here so we can give you some consideration. Councilman Duncan.
Can I ask staff or the mayor's office to take what you just read, put the link on it, and email it to us? Because I'm happy to then share that out on social media to get that out. But if you could just put that together in an email or something for us, that would.
Third on Plaza, we can put you.
That's right. I'll put it right there in my next one in a couple weeks. But that would be great if you could pull that together for us.
Hannah.
That's right. I'll send it out.
Good idea.
Thank you.
It's a good idea. Okay, that completes my announcements. There is a need for us to go into 2 executive sessions. City Attorney, if you'll please read.
The motion will be to recess into executive session for a time not to exceed 1 hour to discuss personnel matters involving an individual employee as allowed under KSA 754319B1. The open meeting will resume in this room of the City Council chambers. The following staff will be necessary to aid the governing body in its discussion: City Manager Perez and other individuals he deems necessary.
Okay, you've heard the need for our first executive session. There's a motion to go into session by Councilman Dobler, second by Councilman Kell. Can we still use just the voice? All right. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Councilwoman? Oh, okay. All right. We will recess. Give us a 10-minute break before we resume in the executive session. I was giving you the floor. Yep. Okay. We've concluded our discussions under the first executive session. No action has been taken. There is a need for a second executive session if the city attorney will read.
The motion would be to recess into executive session for a time not to exceed 45 minutes to discuss applicants for the chief of police as allowed under KSA 754319B1. The open meeting will resume in this room in the City Council chambers. The following individuals will be necessary to aid the governing body in its discussion: City Manager Perez and anyone else he deems necessary.
Okay, thank you. We have a second session. Motion to go into the executive session? Yeah, probably a good one. Yeah. Okay, we have a motion to extend.
Second.
Second from Councilman Duncan. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we'll extend beyond our 10 o'clock deadline. Now I need a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
So moved from Councilman Duncan, second by Councilman Dobler. Everyone in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Nay. Okay, one. We are going to go right into our second executive session.
What's the time frame on this?
Okay. We're live now. We've concluded our discussions and deliberations in our second executive session. No action has been taken. No further business coming before this body. The meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.